Is Ironheart as bad as you've heard? And if Disney thinks it's bad, what might that mean for the future of the MCU? I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. The IMDb synopsis for Ironheart episodes 1 through 3 reads, well, first series overview says, genius teenage inventor Riri Williams creates the most advanced suit of armor since Iron Man. Episode 1 reads, MIT student Riri Williams builds an advanced armor suit inspired by Tony Stark. While dealing with challenges as a young black woman in tech, she confronts a tech-based threat and must decide if she's ready to become Ironheart. That doesn't sound quite right, but episode 2, Riri's new AI dredges up painful memories ahead of her first heist with Parker and his crew, and episode 3 reads, Riri is uncomfortable being part of Parker's crew. 2 more heists max, and she's out, she promises. Okay, so I would not normally review this. I'm not intending to dogpile on this. I'm betting there's going to be a lot of kind of negativity going out there about this show. I'm not looking for rage clicks, and I try to avoid reviewing things that I think I'm not likely to enjoy, but my options were very limited for content creation this week, so I at least want to try and be productive and use this as a chance to consider the potential better future of the MCU if Disney learns from Ironheart what I hope they will, and what I think would be real indicators that Disney is making changes for the better on future projects that we can detect before we end up spending our money to give them a try. Now, leaks have indicated Disney themselves internally thinks this project is the worst thing they've made for the MCU. Marketing for it has been almost nothing. It was absent from the featured scrolling new content when I went to the Disney Plus website. It was hidden in the search results on Disney Plus until I subscribed, and then it started showing up when I was really persistent. And all of this would seem to support the leaks that have come from inside Disney saying that Disney themselves consider this apparently to be the worst thing ever made, that they've ever made for the MCU. So let's get into it. As far as the story, script, pacing, the package as a whole, I actually don't think it's much worse of an experience for me than was watching Captain Marvel. I think what is similar between these two is that there's an uninteresting hero in that they lack a journey of personal growth that I could root for. They show up having already, I think, kind of arrived. That was more true, especially of Captain Marvel, but I think there's something very similar going on with Riri here. She strikes me as being, well, I think even the writers would agree, although I'll get to that. I think there's some confusion about what are the writers saying here. But she's arrogantly inconsiderate of others and claims that she has this desire to help the field of first responders and other medical endeavors with her tech, like that she has these noble aspirations that might have even been delivered, now that I think about it, in like a voiceover at the beginning, which makes me wonder if in post-production they were like, we need to try and give her a little bit more heroic motivations, because in dialogue, that's not what I hear from her, is this desire to create tech that's going to help first responders, going to improve, that's going to save lives, stuff like that. The words out of her mouth are that she wants to be recognized, she wants to be seen, she wants her achievements to be recognized. She also helps early on in the first episode. She's helping other students cheat on their exams, which I think often in stories is treated as somewhat harmless, and given the largely light tone of this show, I think, arguably we can kind of shrug at it. I think cheating is very common. It's something that we're all aware of happening in schools, hopefully a lot less at the university level. But when you think about, these folks working or going to school at MIT, it's like these are graduating, going to be the brightest minds in all kinds of tech fields. The effects of them not being qualified, not having truly earned their degrees from MIT, could be really dangerous, or at the very least would result in a lot of slowdown and shoddy work done in fields all over the place. And so I think it's kind of short-sighted to treat cheating as harmless, especially at the university level and certainly in a place like MIT, or what MIT is in my mind anyway. I guess I don't really know much about MIT. So she also steals university property, and it's justified in the moment as like, well, she made this using a grant for her work, for her research. But the truth is, it's not legally hers. That a grant, I mean, they don't give us details about the scenario, but I mean, it's a pretty sure thing that like the grant would have been given for her to do this work at the university, and like all the in the black and white print, it would have said this is university property. So there's this kind of like justification on this kind of moral level outside of what the government what the government rules are, what the university rules are, what's legal and stuff. There's this sense in which we're supposed to go along with her breaking the law for the purposes of a kind of a higher moral code of what's right, what she deserves, that kind of thing. But you know, if she came on board the university, she would have agreed to all of how the university operates, you know. So yeah, there's just some inconsistency there. She does create, as I mentioned in reading the spiel for episode 2, she creates an AI that calls us to be, well, I mean, I'll just say this is not a huge spoiler, but the AI ends up being based on her best friend who died. We see early on that she has lost her best friend and her stepdad. And this AI that she creates, kind of like Jarvis was for Tony Stark. Well, this AI is a hologram that can walk around in the room and talk to her, and it's based on her best friend who passed away and her best friend's personality, and like mimics her best friend really, really well, to the point that it seems in the writing that we are supposed to want Riri to soften up and not be so hard and callous against this AI. And when this AI interacts in rare cases with another character, that character is totally treating them like a person. And I'm like, what is going on here? Are we supposed to treat this AI as a person? Are we supposed to actually treat her as though she is the returning departed friend? Just on a dramatic level, how am I supposed to be feeling about this AI character? I think that no matter how advanced AI gets, if we are aware that we're talking to an AI, I think reasonable people are not going to invest in them personally. I mean, think about like how advanced AI has become, how more convincing, more lifelike AI voices have sounded. If I am troubleshooting a problem and having some kind of a voice interface with an AI program, or if I'm doing speech to text with Chat GPT, I'm not thinking of Chat GPT as a person. I'm just trying to feed it what I think it needs in order to give me what I want. It's this very mechanical kind of thing. There is no personal investment involved there. And I think as AI advances, we will very reasonably keep that kind of relationship with AI, as opposed to going in the direction of treating them as persons and having hangout time with them and stuff, like is seemingly the case at times in this show. So it's kind of weird just from a writing and dramatic standpoint. There's also a beat about like her armor, and this is just kind of a nerdy little side note, but like her armor, one character asked her, "Where's your arc reactor?" You know, this is unreasonable. We know that from the first Iron Man movie. Like, this is crazy sci-fi tech. We need some kind of recognition of that. And so you have the arc reactor, which can produce these enormous amounts of energy that make it this otherwise really unlikely, unreasonable tech possible in the world of this story. Well, she doesn't have an arc reactor, and she just has almost a throwaway lines, saying, well, not everybody can get an arc reactor. My armor is wind and solar powered. And I was like, am I supposed to be laughing at this? She's saying this with a straight face. I feel like I'm supposed to take this seriously. Anyway, that was a minor point. So let's get back into it. She also ends up kind of like getting in with this group of thieves, which is mentioned in the descriptions of the episodes, who I think are supposed to be considered likable. They're not. Well, I was going to say they're not hurting anybody. That's important to Riri when she joins them. I don't want anybody to be hurt. But then in one scene when they're storming this corporate building of like this rich, evil corporate guy who is evil, I guess, because he's rich. I don't know. We don't really get a lot of information about like what makes these people really worthy of stealing from. But whoever they are at the top, these guys, these likable quote unquote thieves that we're supposed to be on board with, they are throwing knives at guards. They're embedding throwing knives in security guards that are just doing their jobs. And then in a later scene, like a non-fatal gunshot wound is given like dramatic weight. When Riri sees one member of the group pull out a gun and shoot someone and it hits them in the shoulder and they fall over and they're going to be fine. But like, oh, that's given the slow motion dramatic moment treatment. And I'm like, I don't get it. The dudes like 30 to 90 seconds ago were just throwing knives that were sticking into security guards that were falling over, not dead, but still they got knives in them. So it's very strange inconsistency there. The dialogue many times also is it feels expositional at times, forced. At times just unnatural, and there's some abruptly forced feeling artificial moments, like we need to have this kind of moment between these characters. Okay, so let's do it. Let's have it right now. And it feels like it's made to check a box of like a type of plot moment and character moment that they want these people to have, rather than anything that feels organic. So, yeah, strange. Now, speaking of box checking, what about that demographic box checking that Disney and Marvel have certainly been known to do? I don't think it's as overt as it could have been. I mean, there's a. I think we've, to a degree, just kind of gotten used to these things being present. But of note to me is that there's a transgender or non-binary character that's in the supporting cast of Thieves that I'm just like, wow, this character feels very much like so many other transgender, non-binary types of characters that I've seen in shows in the past. I'm like, I'm not rooting for the cause of representation in this regard, but like if this were a Christian character, and I particularly was wanting Christian representation, and I was seeing this kind of similarity between Christian characters, I mean, at that point, I'd be like, yeah, I don't really want this. So I'm wondering if even the section of the audience that wants that kind of representation, how they're feeling about this. It feels very just kind of samey. And really that goes across, in my opinion, to a lot of the supporting cast of Thieves and stuff. They feel largely one note, pretty superficial. Admittedly, there is a lot of characters that they have to balance, and so how much time can they really give to each of these characters? Well, again, that goes back to the writing. I think a smaller cast, a different type of story with fewer characters, and we could actually get to know some of these characters instead of them just being superficial kind of rubber stamps. But most of all, I want to get to know Riri and what is driving her. And that's very unclear to me and a bit scattered. Is it grief that's driving her? She tragically lost her best friend and her stepdad, but these are barely represented as more than relationship categories. She says, I lost my best friend. I lost, my stepdad. But we don't really get flashbacks. And people talk about these characters briefly from their own perspectives, but we don't hear Riri talking about them. The flashbacks that she has are largely about that day and that moment when she lost them, but not about who they were to her, how they built into her life, what impact they had on her in her life, that they mean so much to her. I don't really have an appreciation for Riri, for what Riri lost, apart from her losing these categories of people in her life. So is it grief that's driving her? Then there's a lot of work that needs to be done there for me to really feel that. And if recognition of achievement is what's driving her, that may be relatable. I think certainly we all want to be recognized. We want to be appreciated for what we do, for what we achieve. But I don't think that, even though it's relatable, is something that's admirable. I don't think we should be looking for affirmation and respect and validation of our worth and significance based on what we produce, based on what we achieve. We may admire people from a superficial distance for what they achieve. Certainly I do. But the people I most truly admire, I admire because I personally know their character, their selflessness, humility, their sacrificial servanthood and compassion. When I think about so-and-so at my church, I'm like, man, I want to be like that guy when I'm, at his age, 30 years down the road from where I'm at. I want to be like so-and-so. Wow, how does someone develop that? I want to be like that. Those are the kinds of people that I really admire. It's for their character, not for what they achieve. Riri is recovering from loss that, as I said, I have trouble appreciating for the aforementioned reasons. And while she's in that space of loss, she is pursuing recognition through a series of foolish choices, foolish life choices. You know, it's cool that she's so smart, but in her character, she is a foolish person to be pitied. It's hard to root for her in her circumstances because she is deep in those difficult circumstances because of foolish, selfish choices she has made. Of course, there were hands dealt to her that she didn't have any choice over, but the particular circumstances that she is like waist deep in for most of these episodes so far, those were her choices that took her there. And unlike Tony Stark, who at least has his first moral wake-up call in the first 45 minutes of his first movie, we are 3 episodes in, and Riri has yet to have a wake-up call to virtue that puts her on a path I can root for her to succeed in. Now, oddly enough, the reveal of a supporting character named Joe, a reveal of his backstory in episode 3, that I will not spoil. If you look up the cast list and the character list on IMDb, you'll have it spoiled for you because he's got the name he goes by and then another name, and it's the other name that's kind of the spoiler. But the reveal of his backstory, like John Walker, makes him, to me, a much more interesting potential focus and a journey that someone wants to and should go on. He feels guilt and shame by association and is aiming to be a better person in response to that guilt he feels by association. And that's what his whole life is about. I would love to root for him to become the kind of person he wants to be, to rightly understand the nature of guilt and what he is and is not responsible for. I would love for him to go on that kind of journey, but unfortunately this series isn't about him. It's a shame. But as far as cast and performances, the standout character is the one who plays Joe, Alden Ehrenreich. He, especially in one scene, stood out where he emoted in a way that suggested the complexity to his inner workings that then I could understand a little bit more once the reveal happened a little bit later. And that kind of hinting at inner complexity just seems to be absent in other characters. Combined with this revealed connection of his to the events in Iron Man 1 makes me want to show about him, but we're not going to get that. The rest of the performances at times were fine, but other times very often felt artificial to me. I think, though, this had a lot to do with the script. I mean, man, difficult. I just wonder, like, how many times was the script rewritten before they started shooting? How many reshoots did they do after more rewriting and more focus testing or whatever? This is interesting on a meta level to watch and try to figure out what happened here. As far as stunts and visuals, not going to say much about them. They're fine. They're standard for the MCU and Marvel shows at this point. There's not much to talk about in terms of themes that I haven't already kind of addressed a little bit just in talking about not seeing the character journey being set up or started that I want here. But instead, maybe I'll comment or try to comment on what might Disney learn if, in fact, they do think, as we've heard, they think that this is the worst thing they've made for the MCU. Well, their potential for, I think, learning from this depends on what they see as weak when they look at this show and how they see themselves arriving here, how and why they arrived at creating this. I suspect that there is we can pretty much tell and know that there's left-leaning ideology at Disney, but I suspect that specifically there's some left-leaning ideology that has led to a lack of a hero's personal growth in both this show and in Captain Marvel, and to some degree in Falcon's becoming Captain America. I'd have to revisit that show. But I think that's what I was feeling when I watched Brave New World. That perhaps in their minds they think that the way to show that a character is admirable is to not give them any perceived flaws that they need to grow out of over the course of a story, but instead to portray them as the noble downtrodden whose morally they've already arrived, and their journey is to overcome unfair treatment, unfair circumstances. In fact, it's not even clear to me what the writers would consider flaws in Riri's character, if they think they've included some or not. It seems like they just want to show challenging circumstances that she needs to overcome. Now, I see flaws in her character, but the script seems to treat them as non-issues or maybe even as virtues. So I suspect that the solution to the MCU moving in a better direction is not going to be found by the current crop of writers or producers. I suspect that there's something about their perspective on life that is just not going to enable them to make the changes that need to happen in order to correct what's going on in the stories. I think you might think they're unrelated, but I think to have a more satisfying story, you need to have a better understanding of the nature of virtue and just a more truthful understanding of the world and of life and morality and purpose and those kinds of things. So I don't think it's going to be found by this current crop of writers or producers, but instead by a new crop that understands the importance of, in fiction, a hero's journey and the personal growth of character that audiences can root for. It seems to me that if we want to know if the next thing Marvel is putting out has a chance of being an improvement, that instead of looking at trailers, we should probably take a trip to imdb.com and see the past credits for the writers and producers of the project in question. And see, are they new blood, or have they been responsible for the types of stories, MCU, Star Wars, or elsewhere, that we don't want more of? I think at this point the MCU will not be fixed by changing the course of the ship according to test data that says, oh, okay, people don't like this. I don't think that's going to work. I think they need to actually change out not the course of the ship, but the entire bridge crew, starting with the highest officers. All right, no idea what your tastes are in TV shows, but if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Peter, well, skip, obviously. You're only watching this to make CGC content and because other options weren't available in this crazy crunched week for you. So yeah, just skip it. This one is rated TV 14 for, violence. I couldn't find descriptions. Violence, some language, and just kind of being MCU, I guess. And those are all of my thoughts for now on Ironheart, episodes 1 through 3. As always, would love to get your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, click that bell to stay connected. I want to thank the Spirit Blade Insiders for making this review possible. You can get info about the benefits of joining at patreon.com/Spirit Productions. Then I hope you'll check out our podcast. Stay connected to all CGC content over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.